Chief Damilola was a world-famous billionaire, and he was still very young. By the time he was 35, his name was known across continents. His net worth was over $5 billion, and it kept growing every year. He owned chains of five-star hotels, airlines, shopping malls, oil companies, tech companies, and most importantly, a big and famous hospital in Nigeria called Dami International Hospital. As the CEO and director of all these businesses, Chief Damilola lived a life many could only dream about. He traveled in private jets, stayed in mansions guarded by high walls and security teams, and wore clothes made by the best designers in the world. Everywhere he went, people bowed to him. Every room he entered, people clapped for him. But deep inside, Damilola was not happy. He lacked one thing: true love. He had all the money in the world, but not a single person he could trust with his heart. Every woman he met loved his wealth, his name, his power, not him. He wanted someone who would love him for the man he was, humble, kind, and lonely, not for the billions in his bank account. He dreamed of a love that was pure, simple, and true. The kind of love that did not care about money, cars, or fame. Damilola thought long and hard about how he could find such a woman. He needed to be somewhere where no one knew him as a billionaire. He needed to hide his real identity and live like an ordinary man. That was when he looked at his businesses and got a surprising idea. Among his companies was Dami International Hospital, one of the biggest hospitals in Nigeria, even respected worldwide. He decided he would go there, not as the owner, not as the CEO, not as Chief Damilola, but as a simple worker. Not just any worker, but a mortuary worker. He believed that in a place filled with grief, pain, and death, he would meet someone real, someone who saw the heart, not the bank account. One thing made this plan possible: his identity was not widely known. While he owned many companies, he preferred to give orders from behind closed doors. Only a few top managers had ever seen him in person. To most workers, he was just a name, a powerful name, but a face they had never met. This gave him the perfect cover. Without wasting time, Damilola picked up his phone and called the general manager of Dami International Hospital, a man named Adrian. When Adrian answered the call and heard what the boss was asking, he almost dropped the phone. You want to work in the mortuary?" Adrian stammered, hardly believing what he was hearing. "Yes," Damilola said calmly. "I want a simple job in the mortuary. Nothing more." Adrian's mind raced. This was the CEO, the man who paid his salary, the director who could buy entire cities if he wanted. Yet here he was, asking for a job that even poor workers sometimes refused. "Chief, may I ask why?" Adrian asked carefully. Damilola chuckled softly, but there was sadness in his voice. "I want to find someone who will love me without knowing who I am," he said. "Someone who will see my heart, not my title. Someone who will not be blinded by money." Adrian paused for a long moment. Then he understood. The boss was not crazy. He was simply looking for something money could not buy. "I will arrange everything, sir," Adrian said with respect. "Good," Damilola replied. "And remember, not a word to anyone." "Yes, sir," Adrian promised. And with that, the journey began. A billionaire stepping out of his palace and into the cold halls of death, searching for a love that would see past everything the world worshipped. The morning was quiet when Chief Damilola arrived at Dami International Hospital, not as the mighty CEO, but as a simple mortuary worker. He wore plain blue overalls, old sneakers, and carried nothing but a small black bag. No security guards followed him. No luxury cars waited outside. For the first time in many years, he walked alone, like an ordinary man. A cold wind brushed against his face as he stepped through the hospital gates. Nobody turned their heads. Nobody whispered his name. Nobody cared who he was. And that was exactly what he wanted. There is a Nigerian proverb that says, "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." But Damilola was not looking to burn anything down. He was seeking the warmth that money could not buy. Inside the hospital, the air smelled of medicine and cleaning chemicals. The floors were polished, but the walls carried the heavy silence of pain, hope, and death. It was a place where life and loss walked side by side. The mortuary was even colder. The smell was strong, a mix of disinfectant and sadness. Steel tables lined the room, and body trays slid in and out of tall metal freezers. This was now Chief Damilola's world. A supervisor who had no idea who he truly was handed him a mop and a list of cleaning duties. Clean the floors, move the bodies, wipe the trays, empty the waste bins, and be fast about it, she barked without kindness. Damilola nodded quietly and took the mop. He said nothing. He had prepared himself for this. There is another saying, "The river that forgets its source will dry up." Damilola knew where he came from. He had once been a young man with nothing but dreams. He had swept floors, sold small goods, carried heavy loads, long before the billions arrived. He had not forgotten how to bend his back and work with his hands. The first hours were hard. The mop was heavy. The floor seemed endless. His back ached. His palms, used to holding fine pens and phones, grew sore and blistered. At times his eyes burned with the sharp smell of chemicals. But Damilola kept working. He reminded himself, no pain, no gain. He moved bodies too. Some were wrapped carefully, others were nameless, forgotten souls. Each time he touched one, he whispered a prayer. For them, for himself, for the journey he had begun. The other workers barely noticed him. To them, he was just another poor man trying to survive. Nobody offered help. Nobody offered friendship. When he went to eat lunch, he sat alone at the back of the hospital cafeteria with a plastic plate of cold rice and beans. In his old life, chefs would prepare meals from 5-star menus. Now, he ate whatever was served, grateful for every spoonful. He slept in a small staff room with a thin mattress and no fan. The nights were hot, the air heavy, but he did not complain. He knew the road to finding true love would not be easy. A man who seeks honey must brave the bees, another proverb said. Chief Damilola had left behind gold and diamonds for dust and death. He had traded soft chairs for hard benches, soft voices for loud orders. But he did it all with purpose. He was searching for something precious, something pure. And he believed deep in his heart that the greatest treasures are often hidden in the darkest places. He whispered to himself before sleeping that night, "I must decrease so that my heart can increase." And with that, Chief Damilola closed his eyes, ready to face another day of sacrifice, hoping that somewhere in this sea of sorrow, love, true love, was waiting. The next morning, Chief Damilola woke up early. The thin mattress had not given him good sleep, but he was determined. He cleaned himself up quickly, dressed in his plain blue uniform, and made his way to the mortuary. The halls were already busy, with nurses, cleaners, and workers moving up and down. The smell of bleach and sweat filled the air. Everyone looked tired. Everyone looked hurried. At the mortuary door, standing tall, like a soldier guarding a gate, was Supervisor Aria. She wore sharp black shoes that clicked loudly on the floor. Her face was always tight, like someone who had forgotten how to smile. In her hand was a clipboard, and in her mouth were bitter words ready to pour out. The moment Arya saw Damilola, her eyes narrowed. "You, new boy, you're late," she snapped. Damilola looked at his watch. He was not late. It was still 15 minutes before the start of the shift. But he said nothing. He simply bowed his head slightly and said, "Sorry, Ma." Arya's lips curled in a sneer. Sorry will not clean the floors. Sorry will not wash the bodies," she barked, pushing the mop into his hands roughly. The other workers nearby said nothing. Some looked away. Some hid their smiles. It was clear they were used to Arya's bitter ways. There is a saying, "The mouth of an elder may stink, but his words are still wise." But Arya's mouth stank of pride and cruelty, and her words carried no wisdom. Throughout the day, Arya found ways to make Damilola's life harder. When he cleaned the floors, she would march behind him, pointing out tiny spots he had missed. "Is this how your mother taught you to clean?" she jeered loudly, making the other workers laugh. When he moved a body carefully, she would scold him. "Move faster. We don't have all day. You think you're a prince here." At one point, Damilola accidentally dropped a small metal tray. The sound echoed through the room. Arya was there in seconds, her face red with anger. "Fool! Idiot!" she screamed, her voice sharp like a whip. "Maybe you belong in the grave with the dead, not here working with the living." The words cut deep. In his real life, Damilola was called Sir, Chief, Boss. Now he was being called a fool by a woman who didn't even know his true worth. But he swallowed his pride. He remembered another proverb. "The goat that is destined for the king's feast does not know it will be bathed with cold water first." This was his cold water. This was his test. He bowed his head lower and picked up the tray. By lunchtime, his back ached, his hands were rough, and his heart was heavy. He sat alone at the edge of the cafeteria again, eating plain rice with dry stew. Arya passed by and gave him a sharp look. "Eat fast. I don't want to see you sleeping on the job," she said coldly, loud enough for others to hear. Damilola stayed quiet. He reminded himself, a lion does not need to announce its strength. One day, the truth would come out, but not today. Later that evening, after hours of mopping, lifting, and wiping, Arya called all the workers together. She stood in front of them like a queen, addressing her slaves. "This mortuary must be spotless," she shouted. "I don't want lazy hands here. If you can't work hard, leave before I throw you out myself." The workers murmured softly. Some looked tired, some looked angry, but no one dared speak. Damilola stood among them, sweating and silent. He looked around and saw the truth. Fear ruled this place. People worked not with love, but with fear. There was no kindness, no joy, only survival. He knew he had made the right choice by coming here. If he could find a heart that stayed kind in a place like this, he would find true love, indeed. That night, as he lay on his hard mattress again, he whispered to himself, "A tree with deep roots laughs at the storm." He would endure. The next morning, the hospital halls were colder than usual. A soft rain fell outside, making the windows misty. Chief Damilola wore the same plain blue uniform, his shoulders already heavy with the work ahead. Arya was in a bad mood again. She barked out orders like a soldier, leading tired men into battle. Damilola stayed quiet, sweeping and wiping, ignoring the sting of her sharp tongue. Around mid-morning, a new face entered the mortuary. She was small and slim, wearing the same blue overalls as the others. Her black hair was tied neatly at the back, and she moved with quick, light steps. Her face was tired, but her eyes still had a soft brightness, a light that had not been crushed by the coldness of the place. Damilola looked up from where he was cleaning the floor. For a moment, he forgot the mop in his hand. The girl walked past him, carrying a stack of papers and medical gloves. She nodded politely at him, just a small nod, before heading to the far corner of the room. She did not laugh like the others. She did not gossip. She simply worked quietly, carefully, with respect for every body she touched. There is a saying, when the moon is shining, the cripple becomes hungry for a walk. And truly, when Damilola saw her, something inside him stirred. Something that had been asleep for a long time. He watched her from the corner of his eye. Unlike the others, she did not flinch or rush. When she moved a body, she whispered a small prayer. When a family came to identify a loved one, she stood silently, giving them space and dignity. Arya, of course, barked at her too. Move faster. Don't waste time crying over corpses. But the girl, whoever she was, just nodded calmly and kept working. Damilola wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. He felt tired, dirty, and invisible. Yet somehow, when she was in the room, the air felt a little lighter. At lunchtime, he saw her again, sitting alone under a tree behind the hospital. While others laughed and joked loudly, she sat with a small lunchbox on her lap, eating quietly, reading from an old, torn book. Damilola stood far away, watching. A bird does not sing because it has answers. It sings because it has a song, he remembered. She looked like someone who carried her own song, even in a place filled with silence and sadness. He did not know her name yet. He did not know her story. But for the first time since he had begun this journey, Chief Damilola felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was one step closer to finding what he had been searching for. He turned away quietly and returned to his work. The afternoon sun was high, and the hospital air was heavy and hot. Chief Damilola wiped his face again and again as he moved from one corner of the mortuary to another, pushing a heavy mop across the tiled floor. Nearby, Elena was helping an old man who had come to identify his late wife. She moved gently, speaking in a low voice full of kindness and respect. Chief Damilola, sweeping quietly, could not help but watch. Then, like a storm gathering over a peaceful village, Arya appeared. She stormed into the room, her black shoes clicking loud against the floor, her face twisted in anger. "What is this?" she shouted, pointing at Elena. "Why are you wasting time talking to people? Your job is not to make friends. Move faster." Elena straightened up and looked at Arya calmly. The old man beside her trembled, clearly embarrassed. "I'm just helping him, Ma," Elena said softly. "Helping?" Arya scoffed loudly, making sure everyone heard. "You think you're some special nurse here? You think kindness will save you a job? This is a mortuary, not a charity home." The old man lowered his head and shuffled away, tears in his eyes. Elena stood silently, her hands clenched by her sides, but her face showed no anger, only quiet sadness. Chief Damilola felt his heart tighten. He wanted to step forward, to defend her, but he stopped himself. He remembered. The chicken does not challenge the eagle in the sky. He needed to stay hidden, stay patient, watch and learn. Arya turned to the workers, who were staring silently. "All of you," she barked, "work harder or you'll join the dead in these freezers." With that, she spun around and stomped away, her heels striking the floor like small thunderclaps. Silence filled the room. Slowly, the workers returned to their duties, heads down, mouths shut. Elena bent to pick up the clipboard she had dropped during the shouting. As she did, a file fell to the floor, papers scattering across the room. Before she could reach for them, Chief Damilola quietly stepped forward and bent down to help her. Their hands brushed for a moment. Elena looked up, surprised. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but strong. Damilola gave a small smile, the first real smile he had shown in days. "No problem," he said quietly. For a brief moment, they just stood there, kneeling among the scattered papers, looking at each other. In her eyes, Damilola saw something he had not seen in a long time. Simple kindness. Not forced, not fake, just real. Elena smiled back, a small, tired smile that still carried hope. She quickly gathered the papers, stood up, and hurried away to finish her work. Damilola stood slowly, feeling something warm stirring in his chest. There is a saying, even in the darkest forest, the little firefly shines bright. In the cold, sad halls of the mortuary, Elena was that firefly, small, quiet, but bright enough to be seen by a heart that had been waiting for a very long time. As Damilola picked up his mop and returned to his work, he knew one thing for sure. This was not just about finding true love anymore. This was about protecting it, once he found it. And maybe, just maybe, the journey was truly beginning. Days passed at Dami International Hospital, and life at the mortuary continued in its cold, quiet rhythm. Chief Damilola woke early, worked hard, ate alone, and slept on the thin mattress night after night. Each day, Aria's sharp tongue lashed out like a whip, hurting everyone around her. Each day, Damilola swallowed his pride and reminded himself why he was there. But something had changed. Now, whenever he walked into the mortuary, his eyes searched for one face. Elena's face. She was always there, moving quietly, working carefully. She never spoke much. She never laughed loudly. But her presence made the heavy air a little lighter. One rainy afternoon, as Damilola struggled to move a heavy body tray, he slipped. The tray almost fell to the ground, and the workers nearby laughed quietly behind their hands. Before Damilola could lift it again, Elena was at his side. She grabbed one end of the tray, steadying it with her small but strong hands. "You need to lift from your knees, not your back," she said softly, her voice kind. Damilola looked at her, surprised. "Thank you," he said, his voice low. Elena gave a small shrug. "It's hard work," she said. "Took me a few days to learn too." She showed him how to bend properly, how to grip the tray firmly, how to move without hurting his back. As they worked side by side, Damilola felt a quiet peace he had not felt in years. There was no pride here, no showing off. Just two workers helping each other in a place forgotten by the world. There is a saying, the tree does not stand because it is tall. It stands because it has strong roots. And in that moment, Damilola saw that kindness, not power, made a person strong. As the rain fell harder outside, Elena sat with him during their short lunch break under the old mango tree behind the hospital. They shared a small bench, eating quietly. Elena opened her simple lunchbox, rice and beans wrapped in foil. She noticed Damilola's empty hands. "You didn't bring lunch?" she asked. "I forgot," Damilola lied. The truth was, he had no appetite after the long, bitter hours. Without a word, Elena scooped half of her food onto a clean piece of foil and handed it to him. "Here," she said. "You can't work on an empty stomach." Damilola hesitated. In his real life, no one offered him anything freely. People only gave when they wanted favors, contracts, or gifts. But Elena was different. She expected nothing. She just gave. Slowly, Damilola took the food and nodded. "Thank you," he said again. Elena smiled, a real, warm smile. "No big deal," she said. "We all need a little help sometimes." They ate together in silence, the sound of the rain whispering around them. For the first time in many months, Chief Damilola felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. Hope that there were still hearts untouched by greed. Hope that maybe, just maybe, true love was not just a dream. As they finished eating, Elena wiped her hands and looked up at the grey sky. "I don't know why people think being kind is a weakness," she said softly, mostly speaking to herself. Damilola looked at her, feeling a deep respect. He thought about a proverb his grandfather used to say, "A kind word can carry a man farther than a horse." And sitting there under the mango tree with the kind girl from the mortuary, Chief Damilola knew he had already traveled farther in his heart than all the miles his private jets had ever flown. The days rolled by, heavy and slow like thick clouds. But for Chief Damilola, something had changed. The mortuary, once a place of sadness and fear, now held a small light. Elena. They worked together quietly each day, sometimes exchanging smiles, sometimes working side by side in silence. Little by little, the wall between them was falling down. One evening, after a long day of heavy work, the hospital lights flickered. A storm was coming. Thunder growled softly in the distance, and the rain poured down like buckets from the sky. The workers were allowed to leave early, but the rain was too strong. Many stayed behind, waiting for the storm to calm. Damilola and Elena sat under the old mango tree again, though today the branches shook under the heavy rain. Elena pulled her knees to her chest, hugging herself against the cold. Damilola sat beside her, watching the water gather into small rivers along the ground. The silence between them was soft, not uncomfortable. After a while, Elena spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever feel like life forgot you?" she asked, staring into the rain. Damilola turned to look at her, surprised by the sadness in her voice. "Sometimes," he said honestly. Elena gave a small bitter laugh. "I feel that way every day," she said. She opened her mouth to speak again, then closed it. For a long moment, she said nothing. Damilola waited. He knew the heart speaks only when it feels safe. Finally, Elena took a deep breath. "I work here," she said slowly, "because it's the only way I can pay my school fees." She looked down at her hands. Small, calloused, tired hands. "I want to be a doctor one day," she continued. "Not for money, not for fame, but because when I was young, my mother got sick." Her voice shook a little, but she kept talking. "We didn't have money to take her to a good hospital. She died, right there, on the floor of our little house. I was 10 years old. I watched her take her last breath, and I could do nothing. The rain fell harder, but neither of them moved. My father tried his best after that," Elena said, wiping her eyes quickly. "But life was hard. We ate once a day, sometimes not at all. I promised myself that day, when I watched my mother die, that if God kept me alive long enough, I would become a doctor." She smiled sadly. "To save people like my mother, people who have no one, people who are forgotten." Damilola listened, his heart heavy. In his world, he had seen many people chase dreams for money, power, fame. But this was pure. This was true. Elena looked at him, her eyes shining with tears and strength. "I don't belong here forever," she said softly. "This mortuary is just a step, a painful step. But one day, I'll wear that white coat. One day, I'll save lives." Damilola swallowed hard. There is a proverb that says, "No matter how dark the night, the sun must rise." And sitting there under the rain, beside this brave girl with fire in her heart, Damilola saw the sunrise of hope. He wanted to tell her everything, who he was, why he was there, but he held himself back. Not yet, not now. Instead, he said the only true words he could find. "I believe in you," he said simply. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, smiled a full smile. Not tired, not sad. "Thank you," she whispered. And just like that, a bold bond was formed. Not from riches, not from beauty, but from the meeting of two honest souls, wounded but still dreaming. As the rain poured around them, two hearts began to heal. Days after the rainstorm, the sun returned, hot and heavy, over the city. The hospital halls buzzed with life again. Patients coming in, nurses rushing past, the smell of medicine hanging thick in the air. Inside the cold walls of the mortuary, Chief Damilola continued his work. He mopped floors, he carried bodies, he wiped down cold metal trays. He answered harsh orders from Arya with quiet patience. But something was different now. Every time he passed Elena, every time he saw her wiping her forehead after a hard shift, he felt a small weight in his heart. He remembered her story, the little girl who watched her mother die, the young woman who carried a dream bigger than the world's cruelty. He wanted to help her. He needed to help her. But he could not do it openly. If she found out who he really was, the trust they were building would break. Everything would be lost. He needed to be wise. There is a saying, when giving a gift to a blind man, whisper so he does not know who gave it. That evening, Damilola sat on his thin mattress, thinking hard. He picked up an old piece of paper and a pen. With slow, careful writing, he penned a short note. "This is for a dream too big to fail. Never stop believing. From a friend." The next day, he visited the hospital accountant's office secretly, wearing a plain cap low over his eyes. He asked to speak to a junior staff worker, not someone important. Quietly, he explained, "There's a worker here, Elena. She is owing school fees. I want to pay a part, anonymously. Do not tell her. Do not tell anyone. Just mark her fees as partly cleared. Give her hope to continue." He handed over a bundle of cash, enough to cover a strong part of her debt. Not all, but enough to lift the heavy stone sitting on her chest. The young accountant nodded, smiling with surprise. "God bless you, sir," he said. Damilola only nodded and walked away, disappearing back into the crowd of hospital workers. Later that week, while cleaning the mortuary floor, he saw Elena rush in, her face bright with happiness. She almost slipped in excitement. Her eyes searched the room until she saw him. Running up to him, she laughed, a sound like music in the cold air. "You won't believe it," she said, almost shouting. "I got a call from my school today. Someone paid part of my fees. I can continue classes." Her eyes were shining with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. Damilola leaned on his mop, pretending to be surprised. "That's great news," he said warmly. "I don't even know who did it," Elena said, shaking her head with wonder. "But it's a miracle, a real miracle." She looked at him and said softly, "Good things still happen. Good people still exist." Damilola smiled quietly. There is a saying, "The good deed you hide is the one that shines brightest before God." And as he watched Elena dance lightly around the room, hugging her small book of receipts, Damilola felt no need for thanks. Helping her dream live was thanks enough. In that moment, as the hospital lights flickered above them, a silent promise formed in Damilola's heart. Whatever it takes, whatever storms come, I will protect this light. Because sometimes the richest men are not those who have the most gold, but those who give it away without expecting anything in return. And Chief Damilola, hiding behind plain clothes and a false name, was richer now than he had ever been before. The days at Dami International Hospital passed like quiet footsteps on cold floors, but in Damilola's heart, every day grew warmer. Every time he saw Elena working quietly, every time he saw her helping a grieving family with soft words, every time he heard her laugh, even when she was tired, he knew she was the one. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she was kind, though she was. But because she had a heart strong enough to love a man, not a bank account. Chief Damilola continued to help her. Secretly, carefully. Each small miracle was another seed of love he planted. When her shoes wore out, a new pair appeared in her locker, wrapped in simple paper with no name. When her textbooks were stolen by mistake in the staff quarters, replacements were found, old but good, sitting quietly on her bench the next morning. When her sick father back home needed medicine, somehow the money reached her through a hospital welfare donation, though no one could explain where it came from. At first, Elena thought it was luck, blessings, maybe God answering prayers. But after the third or fourth miracle, she started to wonder. One evening, after a long shift, she sat under the mango tree alone, thinking hard. Chief Damilola, pretending to wipe windows nearby, watched her carefully. He saw the way she frowned, tapping her fingers on her knee. He saw the way her eyes narrowed slightly, not with fear, but with deep thought. Finally, she stood up and walked straight toward him. Damilola froze, pretending to focus on his cleaning. "Adam," she said, using the false name he had given. "Can I ask you something?" Damilola turned slowly, keeping his voice calm. "Of course," he said. She studied him closely, her smart eyes sharp and clear. "Do you believe in miracles?" she asked. Damilola smiled a little. "Sometimes," he answered. Elena tilted her head, her voice soft but serious. "Because lately, I think someone's been making them happen for me." Damilola's heart skipped a beat. He tried to keep his face calm. "What do you mean?" he asked lightly. Elena crossed her arms. "Someone paid part of my school fees. Someone replaced my stolen books. Someone helped with my father's medicine." She paused. "And it all started after I told you my story." She looked him dead in the eyes. "Is it you?" Damilola opened his mouth, but no words came. The rain had stopped falling, but he felt as if a storm was raging inside him. There is a proverb: a man hiding under a leaf forgets that the wind sees everything. His cover was thin now. Elena was smart. She had seen through the small holes. Slowly, Damilola found his voice. "Why would you think it's me?" he asked gently. Elena's face softened a little. "Because you're different," she said quietly. "You listen. You care. You're not like the others." She stepped closer, her voice trembling just a little. "I don't know who you really are, Adam, but if it is you, thank you." She didn't ask for proof. She didn't demand answers. She just looked at him with a kind of trust that made Damilola's heart ache. He wanted to tell her everything, wanted to drop the false name, the fake job, the whole heavy mask. But he held back, just a little longer. He smiled instead, a small, true smile. "Maybe," he said softly, "maybe miracles just find good people." Elena smiled back, her eyes shining, and for the first time, a spark passed between them, a spark strong enough to light 1,000 nights. Chief Damilola watched her walk away, his heart full. He was sure now. She was the one. And soon, very soon, the truth would come out. Not to break her trust, but to complete it. Because sometimes, Love is not about grand words or shining gifts. Sometimes love is simply choosing the same soul again and again, even when hiding in the shadows. The sun was setting over Dami International Hospital, painting the sky with soft gold and deep purple. The workers were finishing their shifts. The air was filled with the usual smell of medicine and cleaning soap. Life moved on, tired, heavy, quiet. But Chief Damilola knew tonight would not be like any other night. He had made his decision. The time for hiding was over. The time for truth had come. There is a saying, no matter how long a masquerade dances, it must one day remove its mask. Chief Damilola washed his hands, wiped them on his uniform, and walked slowly toward the old mango tree where Eleanor often sat. Tonight, she was already there, swinging her feet lightly, looking at the fading sun. When she saw him coming, she smiled, the soft, trusting smile that had melted his walls day by day. "Adam," she called. He stopped a few steps away, feeling the weight of everything he was about to do. He took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice steady but soft. Elena sat up straighter, sensing the seriousness in his tone. He walked closer, standing right in front of her, the soft wind playing with their clothes. "I'm not who you think I am," Damilola said. Eleanor frowned, confused but calm. He pulled something from his pocket, a small hospital ID card. He had kept it hidden all this time. Slowly, he handed it to her. Chief Damilola Owolabi, CEO, founder, director. Elena stared at the card, her mouth falling open slightly. Her eyes lifted to his face, searching, questioning, trying to believe. You're the owner?" she whispered. Damilola nodded. "I am," he said quietly, "and I came here not to test you, but to find you." He stepped closer, his heart bare and open. "I have seen many people who smile because of money. I have seen many hands reach out for gold. But you reached out to a stranger with nothing to offer. You shared your food. You shared your dreams. You shared your heart." Elena's hands trembled slightly as she held the ID card tightly. "But why?" she whispered. Damilola smiled sadly. "Because in a world where everyone bows to wealth, I needed someone who could bow only to kindness. And you, Elena, are that someone." Tears filled Elena's eyes, not of sadness, but of shock, of overwhelming emotion. All the pieces began to fit together. The secret help, the quiet support, the silent miracles. All along, it had been him, the powerful man who had chosen to become nothing, just to find something real. There is a proverb, when the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind. Damilola knelt slowly on one knee, not with a ring, not with riches, but with truth. "I am not asking you to love a title," he said. "I am not asking you to love the wealth. I am asking you to love the man who has already fallen in love with you." Elena covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she dropped to her knees too, right there under the mango tree, and wrapped her arms around him tightly. "I loved you before I even knew your name," she whispered into his shoulder. "I loved the man who lifted trays, mopped floors, and shared my rice and beans." The wind blew gently around them, carrying away all the lies, all the fears, all the doubts. In the cold world of death and sadness, love had bloomed, quietly, boldly, beautifully. And Chief Damilola, the billionaire who had everything but love, finally found what he had been searching for all along: a heart that saw beyond gold, a soul that believed beyond names, a love that could not be bought, only earned. News spread through Dami International Hospital like wildfire. The man everyone thought was just a poor, clumsy mortuary worker. The man Arya had shouted at, insulted, and humiliated in front of others was actually the owner of the hospital, Chief Damilola Owolabi, the true boss, the silent king behind the walls. At first, the workers did not believe it. "It's a lie," some whispered. "How can it be?" But when they saw Chief Damilola walking through the hospital gates, not in a blue uniform, but in a black designer suit with guards standing respectfully behind him, they knew the truth. The cleaners, who had laughed at him behind his back, now bowed their heads in shame. The nurses who had ignored him now lowered their eyes, afraid to meet his gaze. The junior staff, who had whispered about his clumsiness, now stood silently, hearts pounding. The entire hospital buzzed with nervous energy. People gathered in small groups, whispering, shocked. "Imagine, we ate beside him without knowing. God save us, we mocked our own helper. Chai, this life, you can never tell who is who." But no one felt the shame deeper than Arya. When she heard the news, she laughed harshly at first. "Impossible," she said. "That man? That fool I insulted? No way." But when she was called into a meeting with the board and saw Chief Damilola sitting at the head of the table, calm, powerful, and silent, her knees almost gave way. Her face turned white like chalk. Sweat poured down her forehead. The memory of every insult, every harsh word she had thrown at him, came rushing back like a flood. "You belong in the grave with the dead. Lazy fool, move faster before I throw you out myself." Every word was now a knife turning inside her heart. There is a saying, "Pride goes before a fall, and a haughty spirit before destruction." And Arya had fallen, hard. Unable to bear the shame, unable to face the quiet, knowing stares of her fellow workers, Arya packed her things the very next morning. She left without a goodbye. No resignation letter, no farewell party, just silence and a door swinging shut behind her. Some said she moved to another town. Some said she could no longer face working in any hospital again. But one thing was certain. Arya disappeared from Dami International Hospital forever. And Chief Damilola, he did not fire her. He did not shout at her. He simply let the truth do its work. There is another saying, "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers." Damilola had not forgotten the lessons he learned under her cruelty, lessons of patience, humility, and quiet strength. He had no need for revenge. His heart was already full of gratitude for the journey that had brought him true love, not by power, but by quiet endurance. As the hospital returned to its daily rhythm, the workers learned a lesson they would never forget. Treat every man with kindness, for today's servant might be tomorrow's king. Months passed after the great revelation at Dami International Hospital. The hospital walls that once echoed with gossip and pride now whispered a different lesson, a lesson of humility, kindness, and patience. Chief Damilola Owolabi continued to lead silently but powerfully from his true position as CEO. And beside him, standing taller and stronger than ever, was Elena. After years of struggle, after mopping floors, carrying trays, working double shifts to pay for her dreams, Elena finally graduated from medical school. She walked across the stage proudly, wearing the white doctor's coat she had once only dreamed of. Her heart was full of joy, not because of titles, not because of money, but because she had earned every step through sweat, tears, and faith. When the news reached Dami International Hospital, Chief Damilola smiled warmly. He already knew what he wanted to do. There is a saying, when a child washes his hands clean, he can dine with kings. And Elena had washed her hands with hard work, honesty, and love. On the day of her graduation, Damilola called a special meeting at the hospital. Doctors, nurses, cleaners, and all staff gathered in the main hall, whispering and wondering what was about to happen. Elena stood beside Damilola, her heart pounding. Damilola stepped forward and spoke with calm, clear words. "Today," he said, "we honor not just a new doctor, but a soul who reminds us what true greatness looks like. Not greatness bought by gold, but greatness built by kindness, patience, and strength." He turned to Elena, his eyes proud. "From this day forward," he announced, his voice strong, "Dr. Elena Brooks will serve as the head of doctors at DAMI International Hospital." The room exploded in gasps and applause. Some staff cried tears of joy. Others clapped with full hearts, remembering how Elena had once wiped floors with them, eaten plain rice under the mango tree, and smiled even in hardship. Elena stood still, tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from overwhelming joy. She bowed her head slightly, humbled and honored. Later that evening, as the hospital lights shone over the city, Damilola and Elena stood together under the old mango tree, the same tree where they once shared cold food and dreams. "You kept your promise," Damilola said softly. Elena smiled through her tears. "And you kept believing in me," she replied. They held hands under the stars, not billionaire and worker, not CEO and doctor, but simply two hearts who had walked through darkness to find each other. There is a final proverb that says, "No matter how tall the tree, its leaves will always return to the ground where it was planted." Elena never forgot her roots, and with Chief Damilola by her side, she built a new future, a hospital where love, kindness, and dreams lived stronger than wealth or pride. A new life had truly begun. If this story touched your heart, just like true love touched Chief Damilola and Elena, please like this video to show your support. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this one. Share it with your friends and family, because you never know who might need a little hope today. And please leave a comment below. Tell us what part of the story moved you the most. Thank you for walking through this emotional journey with us. Stay blessed, stay kind, and always believe that real love still exists.